Okay, in this exam paper we've got the first question. Using the information from the case study, explain how the economic can be applied to the healthcare market in the UK. So again, basic economic problem. The economic problem is scarce resources with unlimited wants and needs, so we've got a definition there. So the choice have to be made in the best way, and the healthcare market funding is a scarce resource, so better to say government funding in this, because it's the healthcare market in the UK. It's a scarce resource. It has to allocate between maternity units or improving surgical techniques, so we've got the two alternatives there, so a choice has to be made on spending more money, and there's an opportunity cost. So we've got the application because we've got the scarce resources, and we've got the application of what the alternative wants and needs are. The next question says, in December 2007, the East Sussex NHS Trust decided to concentrate its maternity services in Hastings. Describe one likely economic advantage of specialisation. Specialisation will increase the total output of goods and services, such as doctors will be able to see more patients. So benefit described, 2 marks there. Could have also looked at quality as being improved as well, but that's a valid argument. The next question, the NHS has to decide how to allocate resources between paying for cancer relieving drugs and surgical treatments. Assuming no other choices have to be made, this problem can be presented by the production possibility curve. Question says, on the diagram indicate a point that is efficient allocation of resources and a point where there is an inefficient allocation of resources. Another way of saying that is allocative efficiency. On the graph itself, any point on the line is an allocative efficient point. Scarce resources are being used to maximise production and satisfaction. Any point within the PPF is a market failure or a loss of allocative efficiency. So both of those 2 points are correct. 2 out of 2 for that answer. Next question, explain why X is efficient and why Y is inefficient. Worth 4 marks. Point X on the curve is efficient because the PPC shows the maximum of cancer relieving drugs and surgery treatment that can be produced in current resources. So point C is efficient. However, point Y is a location inside the curve which is inefficient because resources are not being fully used to produce goods and services. They could produce more drugs or surgical treatments with current resources. So well applied answers the question in 4 key steps, with reference to the efficient use of resources and the inefficient use of resources. The next question says, show on the diagram, so draw how more surgical treatments can be provided. In this example, we've got a shift in the PPF, and you've got more cancer relieving drugs and more surgical treatments. It also says explain your answer, so there's 2 marks for the graph. So we've got the increase here and we've got the change up here as well. This could also just be drawn as an opportunity cost diagram. So with surgical treatments here and cancer treatments here, and a reallocation of resources, C to C1 and S to S1. That would also answer that first part. More surgical could be provided when the PPF shifts outwards. There is extra resources in the country and this can be used to produce more surgical treatments. So we've got 4 out of 4 applied in 2 ways to describe the shift outwards, but also what the cause was of that shift outwards. Next question, use a demand and supply diagram to show how the price of private dental treatments is determined. Anything that says how market price is determined or to show a market is just asking for supply and demand. It's worth 3 marks. We've got 1 for supply, 1 for demand, and 1 which is the equilibrium there. State and explain 2 reasons for the increase in demand for such implants. We've got an increase in disposable income. The rise in consumer income means that they get more money to spend. These goods become more affordable as implants are luxury goods. The increase in income will result in an increase in demand. Could say normal goods, could say necessity goods, but there's a positive relationship between the two, so we've definitely got 2 marks there. Increase in the population, which will be more people require these implants. This can all lead to an increase in demand. I think a word benefit of the doubt. I think talking about willingness and ability, that there will be more people willing and able, or more consumers willing and able, may just guarantee that mark. The next question, using a demand and supply diagram, analyse the likely effects on the market, so on price and quantity, for such implants of an increase in the number of dentists who are capable to carry out this work. So we've got an increase in the factor of production in terms of labour. The dentists, increase in supply, increase in quantity, increase in price. An increase in the number of dentists who are capable to carry out this work. Shift supply to the right. Demand doesn't change, quantity would increase from Q1. This creates a new equilibrium. As there is more dentists in the market, supply is greater than demand, so the firm would like to reduce price and increase demand for implants. The key thing that's missing from this market is, or from this answer, is this factor that's affecting supply here. So that if there's an increase in labour, it means that the businesses are more able to supply, because the increase in their factor of production will effectively reduce their production costs. That's needed for this part down here. I think this was a 6 or 8 mark question, so I think we'll just be 1 under that without that key bit of information there. The next question, the estimated income elasticity of demand for private dental implants is shown below for 3 groups of consumers. Explain what these estimates mean, so we need to kind of interpret them and comment on their usefulness for dentists who carry out implants. So we've got a business relevance for this as well. You've got 3 different elasticities here. All the goods are normal goods. So income elasticity of demand for low income earners is 0.02, and average income is, which tells you that YD is elastic. Above average income is 1.65, which means YD is inelastic. We've got some problems here in terms of the figures. So what we actually have is 2 sets of figures here. You've got an elastic and you've got the inelastic here. They're all normal, but you've got necessities at the top here and you've got normal luxuries at the bottom. So at the moment we don't have any marks. This is useful for dentists because based on this data they can decide whether or not to increase or decrease supply to make more revenue. Now this analysis is correct, but what we'd want to look at, so we know that dental implants are a luxury good, but just a luxury good for above average income earners. And the application as well, if we were going to talk about it, is we'd say that they are responsive to high income earners, but unresponsive to these low and middle income earners. There may be little change, we'll just see the rest of the answer, in terms of quantity demand average income earners that they've got. Greater than above average income earners, I've always said that could tell the dentist there will be an increase in demand due to the income rise in this group of people. This one is correct now, so a rise in income will lead to a rise in demand significantly for that group. They can increase supply of their dentist, however data is estimate and not 100% accurate. The good may be elastic, not inelastic, leading to misallocation of resources. A good EO4 point there as well. What we need is some accuracy around what the dentists are going to do. So what we need to assume is that, and the case study tells us, incomes are rising. So dentists will supply more for the higher income band. So part of it will depend who your customers are. So more supply for those people, and maybe a small amount of supply for lower incomes. The estimate, or a really good way to use this estimate, is to link it to the economic cycle. So we don't know what's going to happen in terms of recessions and when they will happen. So we could predict this rise in income, but actually the economy may slow down, and then the dentist would be oversupplying implants. The other comment question on this paper was a comment question on why there is likely to be information failure amongst consumers of processed red meat products. Within the case study, it gave some examples. So information failure happens when one party knows more than another party, which leads to inefficient decisions. This more than, it's better to talk about either costs or benefits of consumption. Processed red meats are demerit goods, but consumers don't know it's harmful, then it is realised. So we need to say what the harmful part is, which was in the case study in terms of health costs. However, the sellers are better known than the consumers. This is when the information failure occurs. So the sellers know the private costs. This could lead to an overconsumption of processed red meat. Too many red resource being used don't maximise consumer satisfaction. So we've got here the example of the market failure as well. This happens because a lack of label leads to misunderstanding. To solve the problem, the government intervention such as forced us to make the label clear for consumers. As it's a comment question, what we need for the EO4 is not a solution, because the question would be looking at the effectiveness of providing information. So we don't need to solve it here. What we need is the opposite side point of view, so that there isn't an information failure. One thing you could talk about is that the consumers still know, or they know what the processed red meat's bad for them, so that they know the private costs, but they are still consuming it because of, for example, inelastic demand. So it might be a lack of substitutes, or a lack of affordable substitutes, which is causing it rather than inelastic demand, rather than an information failure and not knowing. So it's the key part that's missing from this, which is why it would only be 2 out of 4, is that opposite point of view of why it's not an information failure. The last mark question wasn't attempted, but it said discuss whether healthcare in the UK should be provided by the government or the private sector. Now what you have to do is use the arguments that you know about market failures to do the two sides on this. So the two sides are whether it should be provided by the UK or the government, and then the it depends upon is along the lines of which side you choose and then solving any of the problems. So if you're talking about the public sector, you're looking at either a public good argument, and then you talk about non-rivalrous and non-diminishable, and why that will equal underconsumption of this good. You could also talk about it from a positive externality point of view, and again draw the graph and talk about underconsumption. Why it should be private is you could say that if it is free, again that there may be an overproduction and a waste of scarce resources. You could also link it into obesity in terms of the negative externality of that, and talk about it potentially being self-inflicted and other people paying for it through taxes. So maybe if you damage your own health by choice, that other people shouldn't pay for it. You could talk about it depends upon who gets it free, So do you apply free just to emergency treatment? Do you apply it just to the young and the old? Or do you set certain things that you have to pay for? So currently certain people have to pay prescriptions, but again, could you charge for certain treatments, so cosmetic treatments and so on? So you could judge which side's more effective, and that would be the way you could evaluate that question.